Another thing that causes people to get stopped on these certain phases is financial situation. Now, some people are just broke. They're working a job, they've got all kinds of bills, and they have multiple interests. In their mind right now, they just don't have the money. Now, whether or not that's justified or not, in their mind, they feel like they don't have the money. They may progress through the first few phases really quickly. If they're really curious about it and they're kind of an aggressive person, well, they're going to go through the first 4 phases, maybe 5 phases really quickly. They might get so interested, they read all the free stuff, that they would buy it if they could, they just don't have the money. Things aren't good right now, or maybe the car just broke down and the money that they could have to pay for it, well, now it's going out to the car. And basically, they're stuck at phase 5 just because they don't have the money, and they'd love to become a phase 6 and even a phase 7 person. In the meantime, they have to just look for all the free stuff they can get because they can't afford the paid stuff. That can change over time. 3 months later, the income tax check comes in, and then all of a sudden they've got a little bit of more discretionary income, or they start saving up for these courses, and ultimately they have an opportunity to be in phase 6. And these people are nice because they spend a lot of time craving to be in phase 6. So as soon as the money becomes available, they jump right into phase 6 and make a purchase right away. This is why you need to have a sequence that stretches out over time so that you kind of remind these people that you're there, so that when they do jump from phase 5 to phase 6, you're there reminding them, hey, if you're in phase 6, well, why don't you come over to my site? They may be in phase 6 and not even know it because they have the money in the bank, but they've forgotten about your site. So the power of email marketing is you remind them where they're at in the prospect readiness phase. And you don't remind them by saying, are you in phase 6 of the prospect readiness phase? Well, that would be kind of crazy to send an email and say that because they have no clue what that is. When you send them an email saying, hey, I've got this great new product I put together, and if you're interested, you can go check it out. Well, when you ask a question like that, in their mind, they're thinking, am I ready to make a purchase? Am I interested? And then they reassess what readiness phase they're in, and then they'll go buy your product. By constantly communicating with them, you're having them reevaluate in their mind where they at in their readiness phase. And this is something that they determine. They're kind of determining what level they're on. They're not going to look at this as a phase. They're the ones deciding how ready they are to go to the next level, the next phase of the process, and learn more information on the topic. Phase 7 is beautiful because once you get these people, they'll buy every course you ever produce. They'll be your biggest fans. Sometimes people could be phase 7 for one particular website, not for another. So it's not even just the prospect readiness phases for one niche. The prospect readiness phases could apply to one particular website. There's a website on gardening tomatoes and a website on gardening carrots. You could say, well, they're kind of the same niche. Maybe the gardening tomato website is compelling and they like the person who made that course more, so they're going to buy anything from the tomato site. The carrot site, well, they might buy it, they might not. Who knows? These prospect readiness phases can apply to a single website, a single author, a single niche. It could go across the niche, and it could even go bigger than a niche to several related niches, but we'll just say that it goes up to a niche. Each of these things has their own prospect readiness phases. So if you get someone who will buy anything within the niche, well, that's good because if you produce new stuff, then you're going to make more sales. If you can get people that'll buy stuff when you come out with it because you wrote it, because they like you, well, that's really powerful. And once you get enough people on your list, you're going to start to have these kind of people who will buy all your stuff because they realize you produce quality stuff and they get their money's worth and they're looking for as much information as possible within that niche. So these are the 7 prospect readiness phases. So what's the solution? How can you target your marketing with this in mind? Well, the solution is to have long sequences. Now, when you're first making a website, you may not have the time to write a 1-year sequence or a 2-year sequence or a 3-year sequence, but there's an easy solution for that. You build the website, you create the sign-up form, and you put in a message that's going to be delivered instantly. You put in a message that's going to be delivered tomorrow. For the first few days, you want a message going out every day. After that dries up, after about 7 days, maybe you have a 3-day break and then another email. And then maybe you wait 5 days and send another email. So the first 2 to 3 weeks have a higher frequency of emails. But after the first, let's say 3 weeks, every 2 weeks, you want an email going out for at least 1 year. Now, if the website's only been out for 2 weeks, you could basically just start building your sequence. And if you stay ahead of your first subscriber, then after a year, you'll have a year's worth of emails. And another thing you can do is you write an email, you blast it out to your whole list, but then you put it in the sequence so that it automatically goes out. Anyone who wasn't on your list today, who signs up tomorrow for your list, they're going to get your message that you broadcasted a few weeks in the future because you've archived it. It's now part of your sequence. So ideally, you want to build your sequence as long as possible because some people take several years to go through these phases. Some people take months. Some people take days. Some people take hours. Some people take minutes to go through all these processes, all these phases. And you don't know what phase they're in when they come to your website. They may have already been spending the 6 months it takes to go through the first 3 phases, and now they're at phase 4 and they come to your site. Your goal with your sequence, too, is to get people to progress through these phases as quickly as possible. You can give them the free stuff and the initial stuff and the education to kind of get them to go through these phases. And the people who are more advanced won't be offended at that if you're given the preliminary stuff because they're seriously interested. They're probably already considered buying your course. They realize that's beginner type info, but that's okay. Maybe you're going to point it to them in a little bit of a creative way, and they're still going to appreciate the facts that they've already heard before. And it's free, so they're not going to be that offended at that. But they're going to be looking at your advanced course, your thorough course, and the affiliate programs you're recommending so that they can buy stuff. Because anyone who does a lot of research online comes to the conclusion that there's a lot of great free information out there. You can have it in a fraction of the time, and you can have even better information if you pay for it. That's how they progress through these phases. So understand that people are in different aspects of these phases. Structure your sequences long enough over time so that if someone is stuck in phase 5 and they're not ready to make a purchase, but then you email them several months later, guess what? They may have transitioned to phase number 6, and then they're ready to make a purchase and they're just waiting for the right course to buy. And then when you put the offer in front of their face, they have the money and they're willing to do it. Just one more thing here is the financial thing. It's not always that they have the money. Like I put it earlier, that they may not have the money. They may have bills and stuff like that. Well, another side of it is they could have the money, but they're just not ready to make the purchase because they're not interested in this material enough to pay for it. They want the free stuff, but they don't consider it valuable enough to pay for it yet. But over time, as they get more interested in this topic, that can change as well. So by emailing people over an extended period of time, you're taking advantage of reassessing where they're at in the life cycle. Because when someone goes from phase 5 to phase 6, they may have forgotten all about your website. And that's why you need the email to automatically go out to remind them. Basically just sending an email saying, hey, come back to my site. There's all kinds of reasons. I've got a list of excuses to email people. Just by putting a message in front of them, that forces them in their mind to evaluate where they're at in the cycle, and then they can come to your site and complete the next phase that they're trying to complete right now, or that they're ready to enter the phase. You can basically have them go to your site and complete the phase so that they can move on to the next phase. And then phase 7 is beautiful. If you have them just buying everything you come out with forever and everything you recommend, they're going to buy it and they can't get enough of your stuff. Well, that's the ideal. And you'll get people like that. You'll have people in phase 7 coming to your website who you don't have to go through all these readiness phases, but you still want to email them when you come out with new stuff. Have this in mind when you start doing your sequences, and I'll be teaching you exactly how to structure the sequences from more of a psychological perspective and more of a leading perspective. I'll be referring to the 7 prospect readiness phases as well in that teaching.